Welcome to the Being Human podcast, brought to you by First Human. For more on First Human's leadership development and coaching programs, head to firsthuman.com. Now enjoy the show. I'm your host, Richard Atherton. John Williams, author of 2 UK bestseller books and a facilitator of dozens of corporate escapees. Welcome.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for inviting me. I just realised, aren't we 2 world experts on broadcast technical strategy in a previous life? So I thought the podcast was all going to be about technical strategy. I hope you haven't got it wrong.
Well, we could go to that route.
We'll get to that later, maybe.
Yeah, it's actually been a few years since I'm not sure. We're probably both pretty out of date when it comes to broadcast.
I have no idea at all. No, that was that really was a different life 20 years ago or something. Yeah.
God, it's been that long?
No,
so we should both quickly explain for the listeners the reference there. So both John and I are former technology consultants, and we both happen to be consulting on technology in the media broadcast space. Yeah. So that's where we first.
Although we met at a comedy club.
That's true, but hadn't we already crossed paths as consultants?
No, we hadn't. We had a very surreal conversation where I said, who do you work for? And you said, I work for Deloitte. And I said, work for Deloitte. And he said, well, what section? And I said, telecoms, media, and whatever the other T stands for, I can't remember. And he said, well, so do I. And we'd never met each other in the building because you were always on projects.
And you were never placed.
What's that?
You were never placed. You were always on the bench.
Yeah, I was always doing nothing. Yeah, but didn't get a very good deal out of me. We were doing cutting edge work, but nobody wanted to buy yet.
Okay, right. You were the researchers. Yeah. So we've both kind of escaped that world, although you've taken some big leaps out of corporate space and helped others to do so, haven't you? So let's start there with your first book, which you broke through on, and how you've helped people to break free.
Yeah, well, when I walked out of Deloitte in 2003, I think it was, I promised myself, I said I never want to have a job ever again. And, for some people, working at Deloitte and being a senior managing consultant would be their dream job, which is fine. But for me, it just didn't suit me at all. And I wanted something more flexible, wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to do with whoever I wanted to do it, when I wanted to do it. So I always wanted to work for myself. And I first of all did the stepping stone of being an independent consultant at places like the BBC, where you also did a lot of work, and then built up this whole new career where I trained as a psychotherapist and life coach, and started running creative events live events for creative people in London called Scanner's Night. Scanner being somebody with lots of ideas, lots of interests, who finds it difficult to choose and not very good at finishing things. And I ran creative events for people like that because I was one. And then I started helping people with their careers and ended up getting a book deal, partly because of Scanner's Night and some other things I was doing. And that book became Screw Work, Let's Play. And it seemed to hit a nerve at the moment it came out in 2010 that people felt that there's got to be a different way of looking at work and managing your career, which does not involve job for life and hiding your personality at work and all those other kinds of things. That was really my escape plan. Well, it wasn't really planned very well, but anyway, that's how I escaped.
Right, but so first of all, the first step was to train as a psychotherapist.
Yeah,
and run these nights, these Scanners Nights, and then and this is for people, and I'm sure there are a lot of people can relate to this, people who are very creative, start lots of things, but not finishers of projects, right? And then you say, and ended up with a book deal. That sounds easier than I'm sure it probably was.
There is when people say, how do you get a book deal? What I often say to them is the best way is to attract one. So the people I know who got book deals, people came looking for them. And the reason why is because they had a presence in the space. So there are probably people listening here right now who fantasize about writing a book, and so this will be interesting for them. And what you need to do is get active in the space that you find interesting. And one of the themes of both my books, actually, is that sitting around thinking about what you want to do is not going to help. So that's the big error people make when they're trying to make career decisions. They sit and think. I mean, if they think long enough that they're going to come up with a solution, they meditate and some bolt of lightning will hit them out of the sky, and they'll go, "That's it! I want to be a fireman, of course. Why didn't I think of it before?" Or something like that. And it doesn't really work like that. If you sit around with that works for maths problems. It doesn't work for anything else. It's sitting and thinking without any new input, without experiencing new things, is not going to move you forward. And generally, it's like trying to imagine what kind of food you're going to enjoy eating. Would I like cauliflower? I don't know. I've never eaten cauliflower. I don't know. Let me Google what people think of cauliflower. No, just get some cauliflower and eat it. And so that's basically my philosophy with people when they're trying to decide what to do. You've got to experiment and do things or run projects. So if you feel like running an event and getting a certain kind of person together in a room who is like you, then do it. It's really very easy to do now. So that's one of the themes of my first book. It's like, have you not realized we can do anything now? We don't have to wait for a company. You don't have to wait for a publisher to give you a book deal, or you don't have to wait for a radio station to hire you as a talk show host. You can do this, what we're doing right now.
Right.
So the idea is go out and do things. And I did Scanners Night. I started writing a blog, and I was coaching people, creative people on their careers. And what happened was a client of mine who went on to create a very successful blog was talking to a publisher about a book deal for himself. And the conversation came around to a concept of scanners, or he mentioned it because he'd been to Scanners Night and he was a client of mine. And they said, "Oh, we want a book about that. Would you put us in touch?" And so that's how I got in touch with the commissioning editor at Pearson at the time. She's now at Penguin Random House, and she also commissioned my second book as well. So yes, it's luck, but you can engineer your own luck. If you're a big presence, someone will come to you, and this happens to lots of my peers. They're going out and they're active in a certain space, and eventually either an agent will come to you and go, "Hey, we should get you a book deal," or a publisher themselves will come to you. And one of the big deciders on books, for those who are interested in books, is what publishers call your platform. So how much of a platform do you have? So having a podcast is a platform. Having an email list is a platform. If you're on TV or radio, it basically decides the size of your advance. So if you're a famous celebrity, if you're someone like Russell Brand, then your advance will be in 6 figures or 7 figures, I don't know, probably 6. And if you're, a huge celebrity, Barack Obama decides to write a book, I think he is doing one at the moment, then another book, then he will get 7 figures advance, or possibly even 8, I don't know. And it's just because he's so well known and he has such a big presence in the world. So we can all play that game of being more active in whatever space we want to be known in.
Okay. But then what about, and I've seen this as a criticism of your work, is what about if you're an introvert and you're not the type of person who's going to kind of create an event and invite a load of people to it, or get out and publicize yourself? What about if you're in that class and you want to, either break free of a corporate job, if that's what you want to do, or write a book or whatever it might be?
Well, look, I don't think you need to be an extrovert at all. I think it's very much about doing it your way. So I'm kind of halfway between introvert and extrovert. So a live event is good, but I don't really want to run. There are other things I wouldn't want to do, and wouldn't be fun for me. And for other people, like I've got a client who was a behavioral economist, and he did a few of my courses and got the bravery to quit his job and he did remarkable things with 3D cutting machines, started making products for people. He makes props for big feature films now. He's like a maths geek. So he loves the computer modeling that's involved. He's got, I don't know quite how he did this, but he has just a huge number of followers on Twitter. And he's connected with some of his heroes. In fact, he ended up interviewing Cory Doctorow, the novelist, for a major newspaper. I think it's for The Economist, possibly. I'm not sure. So all these bizarre things happened once he just started doing things out in the world. But his version was not to go and speak in front of an audience, or to go and try and I don't know, be a star in some way. His idea was to tweet things which are really, really geeky and to get this massive geek following. He wrote a blog post which was about the maker movement. And he said, basically, this is why I'm so excited about it's a new world. It's a little bit kind of what I'm writing about in my books. Like, I don't need a job anymore. I can make stuff and I can sell it to people, and I'm going to be a maker. And it was really impassioned. But he would not want to give that as a talk. I don't think that would be fun for Tim. And that blog post got him noticed by that, led on to him doing the interview with Cory Doctorow and all sorts of other things. So you can do it in your own introvert way. You can be, the super Excel geek. You can be whatever it is you're, if I'm still passionate about broadcast technology, I could be blogging or doing something around, media asset management, which is my area of speciality.
Okay. And that ties into something else which I know is in your work, which I actually got a lot out of, and that's this idea of finding your own way that suits your personality and your characteristics. And I know something that you advocate is the wealth dynamics approach. Could you share a little bit about that?
It's a personality profiling system. It's a little bit similar to Myers-Briggs, which quite a few people know, but it's designed for entrepreneurs, and it's just got 8 different profiles, and it helps you understand what kind of business would suit you or what role in the business would suit you. So the categories are fairly similar to a lot of other personality profiling things, but there's stuff like I'm a creator, and that's somebody who's got lots of ideas, good at starting things, good at creating products, not very good at anything else, not doesn't really think about finance or planning or timelines or people. And then there's a classic people person, there's a classic branding person, there's a deal maker person, and so on, all the way around. There's a square of 8 different profiles, from introvert to extrovert, and from people who are into ideas and people who are into reality, the current reality, and their senses. So I find that really useful because I think the thing that most people get out of personality profiling is that you realize that you don't have to be like other people. It's very easy to compare us and go, I used to look at the programmers when I was a software developer and think there's a moment I remember when I was standing in the R&D department of Avid Technology, was the company I worked for then, and thinking, I'm never going to be one of these people. I'm not actually. First of all, I don't think have the raw intelligence of some of the people in this room who are literally geniuses. And secondly, I don't have the brain for software to the level where I could be like that, where I could be like a world-class software developer, which is what they were. And they were doing special effects software, which is some of the toughest software in the world to write. It's really all about speed and algorithm and incredible things you have to do, and AI as well. And that was that moment when I remember standing there and going, I'm never going to be one of these people. I'm an okay programmer, okay to good, but then everyone thinks they're an okay to good driver, right? Have you seen that research? Everyone thinks they're better than average driver. Well, you can't all be better than average. So I thought I was kind of maybe slightly over average programmer, which I suspect probably means I was bang on average, if not slightly under. So I did some things and I thought were quite good, but I thought, actually, that's okay. I'm okay with not being able to be as good as these people, because that's actually not what I want anyway. I wanted something else. I mean, it began this long journey to find out what on earth that was. And what it is actually is coming up with ideas and making them happen. That's what creative ideas, but kind of business and product ideas. That's what I do with clients, and that's what I do with my own projects. It's what's fun for me.
And it's doing them yourself and helping others to realize them.
Yeah. So my company, the Ideas Lab, helps people turn their ideas into world-class businesses, books, and brands. So whether you want to launch a product or a brand, or a personal brand or a company brand, or capture your ideas in a book that's really successful, or form a whole new business, that's what I help people do, and that's what I find really exciting. And really, that's the kind of thing. There's a concept in Screw a Let's Play I talk about, where I say, when you get paid for what you do, even if you didn't need the money, then you're getting paid to play. And so when I'm doing this stuff, which is coming up with ideas for people's businesses and how to name them and how to make them distinctive, it's so much fun. I would do that if I won the lottery tomorrow and had, tens of millions of pounds, I'd still be doing it in some form or other. But now I actually get paid for it, which is good.
The dream.
Yeah. I mean, there's always, nothing's ever perfect. So there's always, there's stuff I have to do, which is not in flow for me and not particularly fun. And the aim for me over the coming year is to find more people, take the things off me which I don't enjoy doing. Planning, finance, hiring people, those things are not enjoyable, and I'm not really very good at them.
Okay. And so what if the world, and this was another criticism I saw of your work, what if everybody just did what they loved? What about the mundane jobs? Surely they need to get done.
I mean, I have seen this argument. It's possibly true. I mean, partly I would say, but there are some people who like jobs that first of all, we imagine that everyone doesn't like a job that we don't like. That's not true. So we imagine that being a bookkeeper will be hellish, or some people, if you're a creative person, you imagine being a bookkeeper is hellish. I've met bookkeepers who love it. They don't want to do anything else but rest numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. And they would not want to be doing what I do or what you do or all sorts of other things. So I think that is the case. The other thing is there's some jobs that need doing currently until technology can do them, which are just not perhaps that enjoyable, and people do them because they don't have much choice. I personally believe that's why I think we should treat people who don't have a lot of choice decently. But I'm not a libertarian, for instance, so I don't believe that the market should just throw people aside and do whatever it will with people's lives, because what will happen is people who have the least choice, there is always going to be a lot of people working on tills, well, for the time being at least, in supermarkets and so on, doing other kind of general customer service jobs where they get paid minimum wage. And I think we need a minimum wage, and I think we need regulations around employment so that those people don't have a horrible time, but they can't take any holidays and that kind of stuff.
Okay. And for those who aren't aware of that term, libertarian just means, no government, basically. Is that how you're...
Yeah, it means we don't like paying tax and we let the market decide everything. And quite why you think that the market deciding everything would be a good idea is to a certain extent that is capitalism, right? But the market decides a lot of things that, to a certain extent, I think it works. But if you leave it completely unconstrained, then people's lives just get destroyed in the process, it seems to me.
Right. But libertarians might argue, well, we've never actually tried that, right?
Yeah, right. But people also, on the opposite side of the political spectrum, will say we've never tried pure communism. Let's give it another crack. But every time we've done it, it's not turned out very well. So probably a reason no one's actually done it.
Okay. All right. So coming back to your ideas lab, and so what I understand from that is you do work with entrepreneurs, and I'm sure there will be a section of the people listening who are either they are an entrepreneur or they would like to be. A lot of people work in jobs, and you talk about the best employee is not a worker but a player. So expand on that.
Yeah, I think, sometimes you need people who just follow the rules, but I think sometimes the most valuable employee you can have is actually a player, not a worker. That means they are at least partially driven by internal motivation. They're not just following orders. They are driven because they believe in what you've asked them to do. They believe in what the company is doing. They enjoy what they're doing. It suits them. And they have some nous about how they approach things. It's a very English word. But I thought of calling a book that at one point, but I don't think most people know what it means outside the UK. So just common sense and initiative. So that's what we want from people quite often. So when you ask somebody to do something, they don't just do it in a sort of minimum basic way. They do what's the best way of doing this? And how can I get it done quickly so that I can get on to something else? And that's that's what you want an employee to do, really, and do something really well and get on and move through their workload quickly. And that's what I think a player does, because they will say, well, what if I actually take time out and while my boss is telling me I should just tweak. I remember when I was a software developer, they'd always say, well, can you add this new feature to the program? And what I did is I started developing a whole new branch of the software without telling them. And then eventually said, hey, I've written a new version. Should we just release this? And I went, oh, yeah, let's do that. But they wouldn't let me do that because they had this list of features they wanted, and they felt like that was a waste of time to start a new version, all this kind of stuff. So, but I just did the right thing because it was the right thing to do. So that's what I'm talking about as a player. It's also somebody who's more flexible and more agile. So in the old days, you wanted somebody who just followed orders. But that doesn't really work too well anymore because things are moving so fast. A lot of companies complain that their staff are not agile in their thinking, or the organization is not agile. And that's a big problem when in 6 months' time, the industry you're in could look completely and utterly different.
So if I'm a CEO listening to this and I want more players and less workers, and I don't want them to run off and join one of your courses and start the job of their dreams, but work in my company and be an effective player in my company, what's your advice to them?
Well, you've got to make sure that you're creating jobs that give a certain level of autonomy and allow people to choose how they do things, and maybe give them a little bit of flexibility of working, of hours, of location. Give them flexibility of how they do something, as long as they get something done. That's more important. And make sure that you're getting a person that really suits the job. That's obviously what everyone's trying to do, but sometimes weirdly people will lie in an interview to get a job that doesn't suit them, and you have to get rid of them. And what you want is somebody where their unique ability, as some people call it, it perfectly suits the thing that you want them to do. And but it does mean that you've got to loosen their shackles a little bit and give a bit more flexibility and a longer lead for what people want to do. And it also means, actually, don't be worried about people like me, because there's that example of Pamela Slim, who does a similar thing to me in America, and the book is called something like Escape the Cubicle Cage. And Google invited her in, and she opened her talk. I watched her talk at Google. They've had all sorts of fascinating. They've had Dave Allen as well.
Previous guest on Big.
Yeah. And I watched her talk, and she says, when I got invited by Google to come in and talk to the staff here, I kind of wonder why they're doing it. It felt like that would be the equivalent of me inviting my husband to spend the weekend with Selma Hayek. I mean, that would be insane. So, because her job is all about helping people leave the cubicle cage. But then she said she realized that everyone knows that people are going to work at Google not for their entire lives. It's very unlikely. They're going to move on. A lot of them want to start their own business. They want to exit and run a startup. And so why pretend that that's not the case and try and lock people down and, keep them in the dark so that they stay as long as possible? Instead of that, invite people in to give really inspiring talks about entrepreneurship. Make sure that when they leave in an ordered way, and then maybe it's more likely their startup's going to succeed. And quite often Google go and invest in those things afterwards or buy them out. So you can, if people are millennials are going to stay 2 years anyway, you might as well just why not actually talk to them about how they're going to leave and what that's going to look like.
It reminds me of so when I was at Deloitte, where we both worked, they invited in a speaker. So she was the sister of a brother-sister duo who set up Costa Coffee, which is a big coffee chain in the UK. I'm not sure internationally whether Costa Coffee exists. And her message was, leap and the net will appear. So you could just
really
the whole crowd thinking, what now? Should we quit? And in fact, not too many years later, I did exactly that.
I think that, I don't think the net will appear unless you build it. I think I prefer that quote. I think it's a Ray Bradbury quote of we must jump off cliffs and build our wings on the way down, or something like that. So that at least has some self-agency in it. You have to build the wings. And I recommend people, if we're talking about people quitting their jobs, don't do it until they at least know what they're going to do. So it's a really bad, this generally goes very badly. If people quit their job, like maybe they get some redundancy payment or something like that, or they manage to get a payoff, and then they start wondering what to do. That never goes well, I can tell you. Almost never. They basically burn through their cash, and then they go back into the same kind of job they had before with pretty much no insight. Because what they do is they sit there and they see their savings going down while they're trying to do blue sky thinking about what they want to do with life. And then often they sit around and think and read books rather than Google things, rather than actually try things, which is what I recommend people run what I call them play projects. Like, what's something you want to do for the sake of doing it, and you feel that would be really rewarding, and you don't even know where the money's going to go. And there are loads of examples of my clients where we've got them to do that. And it's led, in the same way that Scanners Night led to my book deal, and that led to all sorts of things. It's training as a psychotherapist led to, informed a lot of my work as a coach, even though I didn't expect that at the time. And lots of my clients have done funny little projects that have just gone off. A woman did a really great blog about actually the death of her mother and the humor in that. Actually, was the humor in the darkness, and she ended up that ended up connecting with all sorts of charities, getting loads of accolades, and then that kind of inspired her to go and create something which is a walking tour for foodies in Brighton, which has got loads of press since then. So yeah, completely unrelated. So we think that's the thing that happens if you go and do something you're excited about. Then it puts you out there with a kind of, it gets you creative, but also with the right energy. And if it starts to sound a bit woo-woo now, but if you're out in the world meeting people and you look like you're having fun, who doesn't want to be around people like that? So that's actually part of why you want to hire people, and why you'd want to follow people.
So just get in action with something that has you.
Yeah, get in action with something. And when I talk about a 30-day play project, I used to run this course, the 30-day challenge, which we ran 10 times. Over 1,300 people took it, and it was to come up with a project that required you to output something to the world within 30 days. So people would do a blog, or they'd run a live event. So one of the people on there, Sarah Wheeler, started a comedy night, and on the 30th day, right at the end, she started this comedy night, which was really good. And she had really good people on, and she's funny too. She does comedy music. She's now evolved. That night is still running. It's called Rye Laughs, because it's in Peckham Rye in London. And that's evolved onto her teaching ukulele to people like Google. And then that evolved into her teaching, female founders about running her own business. And then she just did a comedy song, believe it or not, about GDPR, the new EU privacy regulations. That's gone viral. She's on the radio today, in fact, one of the BBC local radio stations talking about it, because everyone's been sharing it, because, we're talking today on the day it comes into force. So, a random project like that turns into an entire business and new career for her. Everyone probably thinks this sounds very pie in the sky, but these things really happen, and they do turn into. Like another client did a thing in 30 days. She wanted to be a photographer, and because she read my book, and it said, basically, don't just do anything. Don't just kind of take any work that's coming. Define yourself. Choose a super niche, I call it in the second book. And she said, okay, well, what do I feel most strongly about? I feel about it's dating profile photos. So what I'm going to do is set myself as the world's first dating profile photography business, which she called Hey Saturday. And she did that, and she looked for her first client within this 30-day challenge community. We had a couple of hundred people on at the time. And she found somebody who volunteered to have photos taken for a dating profile, like Tinder or whatever. And that person then recommended, she liked Saskia so much, who started this business, recommended her first paid client. And now Saskia has photographers working under her in multiple cities in the UK. I think there's about 10 of them. It's actually like a proper business. She's also set up in New York. So and she's been in every press, every publication you can imagine. Early this year, she was on the front page of BBC News with the story of her business. So these little quirky projects turn into serious businesses, particularly creative businesses, but even conventional ones. You do something just for the fun of it, and you meet somebody and they give you a job or a contract or something.
It reminds me of something that a guy called Professor Dave Snowden talks about. He's a complexity thinker, and he's actually coming up on the podcast. And he has this idea that if we're working in in the complex realm, and of course, entrepreneurs setting up businesses are working in complexity, but also large businesses are operating in a complex realm. He talks about this idea of obliquity. So this idea that if you're heading towards some goal, it's not always the best strategy to tackle it head on. Yeah. And think your way through what a direct route might be. Sometimes a more successful culture is to probe and experiment with something that may feel oblique to what it is you're ultimately trying to achieve. That seems to resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because I think the education system is the problem, and it's taught us to think in a very linear way, and only put your hand up if you think you know the answer and all that kind of stuff. And no, basically when you put your hand up, the answer is generally either right or wrong at school, maybe until you get to university. And so there's only a yes or a no. And with jobs as well, there's only a yes or no. Did you get the job or not? I didn't get the job. I didn't get the interview, or whatever it is. But there's no grey area generally. But when you get into entrepreneurship, everything's a grey area, and it's a kind of high thinking of chaos versus order. Entrepreneurship, there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of kind of chaos in your day-to-day life, of just things coming at you, and it's something that the education system prepares you for very poorly. So we think that you're either going to make the business work or it doesn't, but that's not true. If you decide that you are going to make that business work, even if whatever it takes, then generally, as long as you're willing to adapt what the business is and what shape it takes and what flavor it is, you can almost certainly make it work in the end. Or whether you'll end up a billionaire is another matter. So, there's a kind of pass or fail on do you become a kind of viral growth startup? That's a different thing. But if you just want to have a really good career as an independent consultant, or you want to start a business, which is maybe an agency, or maybe it's, I don't know what it is, something more creative of the kind I've spoken about, there isn't a yes or no. There's just you just keep at it, and you respond to feedback, and you change your course accordingly. There's a cartoon that you see do the rounds on social media quite a lot, which I believe goes back to Dimitri Martin, who's a stand-up comic. And it says, this is what people think success looks like. And it's like A's here, B's there, and it's a straight line in between. And he says what success really looks like. And there's A and B and just this giant squiggly mess in between. And that's entrepreneurship. And that's actually the most interesting and creative careers are of that shape as well. I mean, if you want to be a neurosurgeon, it's more a straight line. You've got to study, and there's a certain way of getting in there. But for other things where you're moving more organically through the process, and you don't know where your career is going to go until you've got to the next step. So you get to this point on your journey, and the view is different from what it was before. And now there's options you hadn't even thought of. And now you're firing off in a different direction because that feels right and feels more exciting than what you originally planned. So that's a whole different way of thinking about careers and work that, unfortunately, what I say in my second book, Screw Up, Break Free, is that the education system trains us to be worker bots. Unfortunately, it really does, even today, kind of make us passive people who are designed to follow instructions. There isn't, even from what I don't have children, but from what I gather of the education system today, still not actually that radically different. If there's a little bit of creative thinking, it's kind of, a little kind of sprinkle on top of what is otherwise a sit down, shut up and do what you're told kind of establishment. And that's a shame, because I think it's not going to work in the future with the way technology is going to take the menial stuff away from us. So what you need more than anything is to be able to be creative, be caring, and to collaborate. So 3 C's apparently that robots still quite bad at.
Oh, okay. That's the way we escape the replacement. So be creative, be caring.
Yeah, and collaborative. So those are the 3 things that AI and robots are quite bad at doing. They're not good at being creative at all. They're not very good at being caring. And they'll get there eventually. They'll be able to simulate caring, and actually it'll probably work because you press the right buttons in the human psyche and it probably feels right. So I'm a bit cynical like that. And then, but and collaborating in terms of, what happens when 2 people put their heads together and try and do something together. some kind of magic occurs. It doesn't happen between two instances of the same program. So those are the things that we need to be focusing on. And we're looking at things like there are, I forget how many, but there are millions of people employed in jobs like driving and trucking around the world. A huge proportion of people are employed in driving people in cabs or in lorries, delivering things, or courier firms, and all of those things, and all the businesses that support those with replacement parts, and also give them food and all those kind of things, and help them fill up petrol. All those jobs are going to disappear really soon because autonomous vehicles are coming, and they're really just around the really pretty close now, a few years away. And once those come in, we'll see like 100% unemployment immediately for all those people who are drivers. Now, I mean, okay, it won't be immediate because it will be a staged thing. But, here's Uber sucking the world's private hire employees into their ecosystem. And then they're already building their own autonomous vehicles in order that they can make them all unemployed. Now, that's actually the nature of a startup. That's the nature of capitalism. So there's nothing evil particularly about that. But we need to realize that this is going to happen. This is and driving is probably aren't many people listen to this who make a living out of driving, but it's moving up the scale as well. And we're seeing outsourcing for medical things, for legal stuff, for
actuaries. I heard, actuaries are on the list.
Yeah, right? Stuff that previously was a certified profession.
Right, very high IQ work as well as,
Yeah. So, and IBM Watson does quite a good job on legal research already. So these things are coming along. And if your job is easily definable and replicable, then you're in trouble.
Right. But even the creative part, right? And God, I didn't expect this podcast to go quite so gloomy, but right. I mean, isn't there AI that created symphonies now that people can't distinguish from actual symphonies? Yeah. So
possibly. I don't think you should underestimate technology. I think it may get that way. And I do think that you press the right buttons on the human psyche and you will get the response you want to make you feel good. And there will come a point when people will have robot companions and make them feel less lonely, for instance. So, and yes, there will be things like symphonies written by software. I'm not too worried about that. I think people will still value. Well, what will happen is we've already seen a massive shift in lots of industries, like the music industry, to the point where it's really almost impossible to make money out of selling music itself. And so what happened was the entire industry flipped, where it used to be that you put on gigs in order to promote the music sales, and now you do music sales in order to promote the gigs. And the gigs become more and more elaborate experiences, and we're paying money to go. The festivals are huge in the UK. There's loads of them, and people are paying a lot of money to go to a festival because they want an experience. So there's no alternative for that anymore. The value of information is dropping, but the value of an experience is, if anything, increasing.
A human-led experience, right? There'll probably always be a difference between a robot singing and another human being, or at least for a while. That's going to be.
You've got a while. That's all I'm willing to commit to.
Right. Well, talking about human experiences, so I was touched that in your first book you talk about the death of your father very early, and that I know this is a bit of a career, a gear shift now, but given that this podcast is about being human and going a bit deeper, so how do you think that's informed your work, that early loss, and do you open and share about that a lot in your work?
I think it informs everything. So I think it makes me very conscious, but you don't know how long you've got to live. And I think a lot of people, I noticed when I was growing up, you'd ask people and you go like, how do you imagine you die? Or you mention how, what would be the best way to die? And you get this sort of dreamy look come over people's faces where they go, I'll be 80-something years old, lying in bed next to my partner, who now has the delight of waking up next to a dead person. But anyway, we'll brush over that. And I die in my sleep. or maybe you die both in your sleep at the same time, or something.
Holding hands.
Yeah, holding hands. Yes, and you just go like, well, I hope that does happen. I hope that version does pan out, but it could be next week. So, and for me, that's always been that idea that you would, by default, live to 80 and die in your sleep, was clearly, made to be nonsense by the death of my father when he was 34. So,
and you were how old?
6 months old. So I think what it's done is it's made me. That's partly what informs my determination as an entrepreneur. It's just a determination not to have a job, because I never found jobs very satisfying, and it's just a feeling. And I do often think, if this was okay, if I died next year, would this be the right stuff to be doing for the next year? And I do think on those things, and I think it's a very good thing to assess, because you can be very successful outwardly and still not feel like that was a life well spent. So I'm always asking myself and pondering that, and I think that's a good thing to do.
So it gave you this, I can see how that's given you a keener appreciation of life and a desire to make the most of it. What about the absence of a father?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to have a father. So I think, it probably did. Yeah, well, it did have an impact. Actually, funny enough, there's I think there's some research people who lose parents young, and they're often quite driven. Eddie Izzard talks about that, and a few other people. So there might be something in that. I think also I have probably equally significant is that I have a condition where my pituitary gland doesn't work. It's quite complicated. It's like having diabetes times 4. And that caused, it meant that early on from the age of 4, I was getting a lot of interaction with the medical system, which was very upsetting for a 4-year-old. And that probably had a bigger effect. Well, as big an effect on me as losing my father. And I think that's also given me my dark sense of humor. You'll notice patients always have the darkest sense of humor. And so that's definitely why I have this kind of politically incorrect, will go anywhere kind of mindset and humor. And it also means that because I've experienced some very unpleasant things, as a result of the medical stuff and my dad dying, it means that I'm a bit deeper, and there's nowhere I won't go. Like when I'm working with a client and we're talking about something and how to market them and how to present it, and often these are people who are using their knowledge and they're trying to, and their skills, and they're trying to make the world a better place quite often. There's nowhere I won't go in that discussion. It's like if we need to talk about death and disability and disease or making a shitload of money, whatever it is, it's like nothing is taboo for me.
Isn't that interesting how in the UK making a shitload of money might be...
Yeah.
Having this podcast in America, that would be...
Yeah, in America, it's like, why could that be a problem? So I've considered a little bit, or marketing or whatever. And I still have my sense of ethics about what's right and what's wrong to do in the world. So if somebody is completely, unpracticed, like, I believe in science, for instance. So somebody has some harebrained idea and wants to persuade people to not take... something that's going to save their life and take something that's completely untested as an alternative medicine, then I'm very cautious about that. I am interested in alternative medicine, but I don't just support anybody, whatever they're doing. So I still have a sense of ethics about what people are doing and whether I want to support them in it. I don't have any clients who are racist and trying to do anything I would disapprove of, but I feel will make the world a worse place. But aside from that, anything's open for discussion. And I think that's part of the reason why people like working with me, particularly one-to-one in my groups, because you can say anything and you can do anything. So and I like that.
So you're a coach. Who has inspired you or coached you and helped you be the coach that you are?
Lots of people. I've read loads of books. I also was very inspired, very early on, actually, when I first got into psychotherapy and counselling and having it myself, because that was a big shift when I was younger. I was really into Carl Rogers. So he was a guy in the 1950s who pioneered counseling, and he believed in doing actual scientific research on counseling and therapy and what works, and which a lot of therapists don't do. And so that was very interesting. So he had real research data that he could draw on, and he came up with these principles of what he called the person-centered approach. And the three qualities were congruence. I'm not going to remember them there. Congruence, unconditional positive regard, and I can't remember. Was it empathy? I don't know. But the one I really liked was the idea that you could be congruent. And what that meant is you're authentic. You are what you are on the inside is what you are on the outside. And so we were talking about these as qualities of a therapist or counselor. However, I'd grown up thinking that I should hide all sorts of aspects of myself in a typical English family, perhaps. One that was particularly prone to that. And it was a revelation to realize that if somebody was saying it might be a good and healthy thing and beneficial for other people for you to actually say what's going on inside you and to share that with people.
I was once described as pathologically English, so I could...
Oh, really? Oh, wow, okay. Well, there's hope for
relate.
Yeah. And so Carl Rogers was like a revelation for that. And then I read a book called Families and How to Survive Them by John Cleese and Robin Skinner, which I thought was fantastic. And then actual coaches. I was a big fan of Barbara Sher, who invented the term scanners. She wrote a lot of books about that, and she inspired me in my work. Barbara Winter's book was great. What's it called? Make a Living Without a Job. And then I went on to when I became an entrepreneur. I followed Roger Hamilton, Daniel Wagner.
And Robert Hamilton is the guy who developed Wealth Dynamics. Right?
Roger Hamilton, was the Wealth Dynamics guy. And Daniel Wagner, who's a marketing coach. And
I love the story from your book about Daniel Wagner.
The dog, the dog.
The dog, right? Yeah, Go on, share it. I think
God, I've forgotten that. Yes, when he wanted to get into internet marketing, and he decided to do something around dogs because the people who have pets spend an awful lot of money on them. So he created a web page where all it said is, "What's your number one problem with your dog right now?" And then when they filled it in, it said you would then get a kind of ebook that was going to help you with look after your dog or something like that. And so people will put all this information in and say what their number one problem was with their dog. And then what he did was he took this list of questions, sent it to an outsourcing company and said, can you write answers to research and write answers to this? This does sound slightly unethical, but anyway, to these questions. And somebody researched them all and wrote them. And then he put it together and he sold that thing for whatever the fee was at the time. And that made him a significant amount of money initially. And so he thought, there's really something in this online marketing stuff. But the point I was making is that the power of knowing the problem, and I talk a lot about this when I work with clients. Like if you can tune into the head of your target customer and really understand what's on their mind, enter the conversation already going on in their head, is a quote from Robert Collier, I believe, from the advertising world. When you know that, you can make stuff that really works. So it doesn't have to be a random guess whether your business is going to succeed or fail. You can find out. You ask your target customer. It's a radical technique. But people often miss doing it because they get so in love with their idea, they don't go through that process. But the extreme version of that was Daniel, who didn't even know about dogs, doesn't even like dogs, and managed to create a product that made tens of thousands of pounds, can't remember how much it was, just by doing that research of saying, what is your pain point?
Right. And I would argue ethical in the end, because he helped a load of people with their...
I think so, yeah.
For their dogs, right?
Assuming the advice was good by $1 an hour researcher.
Yeah. How did he validate that what had been produced was valid if he doesn't have a dog? But, yeah. No, but I totally relate to it, because certainly when I put myself in that position of asking customers, what's your problem or what do you really need? There's that fear that, oh God, what if they say something that isn't something I can do?
Yeah.
Or
well, I heard Mike Southern once, who wrote the book. I met him in Bali at one of Roger's events. Sutton's, and Mike Sutton wrote the book The Be a Entrepreneur, which is a big hit. And there was a series of books after that as well. And he said, you go and ask your customer, and you do a piece of work for them, and then afterwards you go, what's your biggest problem now? And if they go, well, I wish we could get someone to clean these carpets, he goes, now you're in the carpet cleaning business. And now ultimately you can decide whether you take the job that is, you don't have to take every job your target customer has. The idea is to find the problem that they have in your particular area. However, you can be flexible about it. Sometimes people are so tight about it. Maybe if you're really well connected to all sorts of suppliers and you can get a carpet cleaning person in, or you discover that 70% of your customers for some reason have a problem with their carpets, might be worth setting up a carpet cleaning business on the side or as part of what you do. That's an extreme example. But as a consultant, you might find that everyone wants graphic design. Everyone wants presentation skills. You don't currently offer it, but you can add that into what you do. If everyone asks for it, then you'd be a bit of a muppet not to listen to it.
Muppet for non-English UK speakers means what? Idiot, fool.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'm just relating as well to the way I see that is that I get so attached to my own ego. All these are the things I'm skillful at. It's like I feel some safety in that. I'm scared of.
Well, it is. No, that is an ego, and people go, "Look, I'm the high concept guy. I'm trying to find your big mission for your company," and actually, the phrase I use is sell what they want and deliver what they need. So often there's a mismatch between what people think is the problem and what is actually the problem. So I run a thing called the Pioneer Program to help people create a unique business and brand that has basically no competition because you're the only person who does that. And it's great fun for me to run, and it's really exciting running at the moment. But the interesting thing is people will come into that thinking what they need is a better social media strategy, or they think they need a branding consultant, as in what they think is branding is design, which is not what I get involved in at all. Or they think they need a trick to get more traffic to their website. And then you look at the website and you go, well, you don't want more traffic to your website. It looks bloody awful. But secondly, there's nothing for people to buy. There's no call to action. It's really not clear what you're doing. You've described it really badly. And, your photo looks scruffy. So these are examples of real clients, actually. And and so you think, well, actually, what we're going to do is fix the proposition first. So a lot of work I'm doing is fixing that. What is this thing you're selling? Everyone thinks the solution is better marketing. But if you have a really, really compelling proposition, you'll find that you don't have to do as much marketing. So what's his name? I think it was Robert, somebody who founded Geek Squad, this IT, fix your computer company. He says, marketing is a tax you pay for being unremarkable. So if you look like everybody else, you'll have to do more and more marketing. And what's happening is, if you're like me on Facebook, you're probably because of the nature of my business. My entire feed is full of marketing gurus and adverts, relentless adverts about how to market yourself. And the problem with that thing of going down the marketing rabbit hole of becoming a better and better marketer, when actually what you want to be is a practitioner, or you want to be a company that does, something different, is that it never ends. And actually, you might be better off putting the time and effort and even money into making your proposition really remarkable, rather than becoming a world-class marketer. So if you have a completely bland generic product, then you will have to be a world-class marketer to make it sell. And you can do that. And actually, if you love marketing more than anything else and you're a total marketing geek, that can work for you. But for the people who aren't, which is most of us, you'd much rather be doing the thing you want to do. So that's why I'm more interested in what is your actual business about and how are you distinctive.
I love that. Marketing is a tax you pay on a remarkable proposition.
Look at Tesla, right? They made all their products are remarkable. And so, yes, they don't actually spend an awful lot of money on advertising, I don't think. They run events. They're not stupid. They have big announcements, and they have, a pre-order thing, and they know how to play the marketing game, clearly, but they're not spending a lot of money on advertising, adverts on billboards and stuff like that, or TV spots, which are incredibly expensive. because the product itself is just so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really struck a chord. And that's what okay, so I can see how you really help individual entrepreneurs with that. And how would you help larger businesses around that? Same principles, presumably.
I think some of what I would do when I go in and consult on businesses is talk about the way to approach the creative process, and to bring in some of my thinking into an organization that might not be used to thinking like that. To understand what the creative process does require that you get comfortable with not having the answer. You have to get comfortable with not being comfortable. So I consult on some of that. Sometimes I stray into with startups, working in the area of branding and also making sure the proposition works in a startup. So does this actually, have you created a startup that's, I spoke to one and they said, well, we can be used for lots of different things. I said, well, unless you have a killer use case, I think you're going to struggle. So a use case is like one particular way you use a piece of software. And if you think of Facebook, when it first started, the killer use case was you could find out who was single at college and send them a message. And that was reason for being on Facebook alone. And then when it broadened out, the killer use case was photos. You put photos on Facebook and everyone can share them instead of them just being on your computer and no one sees them. Now everyone can see your photos from your holiday and see how good you look in a swimsuit or whatever. And that became a killer use case. So you've got to find these things that, particularly in the early stages, where there is one thing that actually is very relevant for software. It's also relevant for services. There's one thing that you are just brilliant at, and that's often the thing people recommend you to others for. Same thing happens if you're a consultant or your own agency or something like that, some kind of service industry. What's the one thing where you are just absolutely brilliant at? You love doing it, and people really, really value it. And you can build a traction around just that one thing, and then you can always scale up from there and broaden afterwards. Peter Thiel says, start by dominating, I forget the exact wording, start by dominating a very small niche and then scale up to your bigger vision from there. And he's a guy he founded PayPal with Elon Musk. And he also was the first ever external investor in Facebook. He's a multi-billionaire. He started another multi-billion-dollar company, Palantir. And so even though he's only interested in billion-dollar companies, he still says you need to start small. So PayPal, when it started, went for the eBay power sellers, which was a group of just 25,000 people. So they thought if we can get them, they have the biggest need for an online payment system. It's going to be a lot easier to get through to them than it is to get through to the general public, who are very, very wary and they don't want to put their credit card online, all that kind of stuff. So they closed all the power sellers, made a really compelling offer to them, and then it grew from there. With Facebook, you had to have a harvard.edu email address just to join Facebook in its first incarnation. And then after that, you had to be in other colleges, and then eventually it went public. And if they hadn't done that, it wouldn't have worked. They wouldn't have stood up to MySpace and Friendster or whatever else was around at the time.
And I think that, well, certainly from my perspective, I reflect on that. The reason I resist being so clear and singular in terms of what I'm offering is I'm scared. Yeah, but what if people don't like that thing?
Yeah.
And then as soon as something else that comes slightly adjacent, I'm like, oh, well, I better get that in case I don't sell enough of the main thing, right? That's where my brain can go in that.
I know, and this is what everybody does, and it's kind of scarcity thinking versus abundance thinking. That's what the woo-woo people say. But if you think of Saskia Nelson, who started the dating profile photography business, and how much press she's got. I mean, there isn't a magazine she hasn't been in, or a newspaper, and she's been on TV and radio as well. And if she had said what most people do when they want to become a photographer is, I'm Saskia, I'm a photographer, I will photograph you, your dog, your business, your product, your wedding, anything, please hire me. How much of that press would she have got? Zero. So it's often by zooming down and making a really strong statement that you become, that you dominate a niche. And in fact, there's this concept from that I like. If you make this niche small enough, what you do, as Saskia did, was to create a new category. So instead of being yet another photographer, freelance photographer, you create an entire new category, which is the dating profile photographer. And if actually now has competitors, none of them are doing as well as her, because when you become number one in your category, when you create a category, you're immediately number one in it. And when you do that, everyone else has to play catch up. And generally, unless you drop the ball, they never do catch up. And what happens, particularly today, is that the market leader tends to get 80 to 90% of the business because they are the default, in the same way that for a long time, it's probably not the case anymore, but, Hoover was the name for a vacuum cleaner. And so the default purchase was to go to Hoover. And you could, that's what category creation does. That's a really powerful thing to do.
Makes a lot of sense. God, I'm learning much more than I expected. Not that sounds awful. I always expected
No, I know. I probably was waffling at the beginning. You should just cut all that stuff.
It all goes in as live podcasting.
Yeah.
Great. Well, the final question I'm going to ask, and this is, I ask all my guests, is, of course, John Williams. To you, what does it mean to be human?
Well, I think, we were talking about this earlier before we on email, and what it makes me think of is compassion. Actually, I think the world is becoming less human as the AI becomes more like a human. I'm noticing the humans becoming more like an AI, to the point where I'm speaking to people on the phone, and it's so obvious they're following a script. I just go like, we might as well just switch you out for a computer right now. Because if you don't have any humanity about you, and no compassion for the fact that I'm having a crappy customer experience, what is the point of you being there? You're just cheaper than the software right now. And I suppose what I'm doing, when I thought of all the different areas I'm interested in, which are very diverse, I'm interested in technology and in people helping others have a better life. And I'm interested in reforming the NHS because I had quite a bad experience when I was younger. And the common theme is making it more humane. And to my mind, what that means is to have more compassion. So technology that's written by developers who don't have any kind of empathy for the user, it's just infuriating to use and unnecessarily complicated. PayPal as well, actually, as the vendor side is really, really irritating to use. And there are lots of pieces of software like that where you just think like, oh, if you just gave a crap, this could be so much better. And that, to me, is what being a human is about. It's about actually caring about the other person. So creating technology that actually cares what the user experience is like, creating businesses that care about what the user experience is like, and creating a world where we care, what people's life is like. So for me, that's what I'm really interested in. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I think it is about having that compassion that technology can't yet do.
Thank you. Beautiful answer, John.
Good.
Finally, for those who want to engage with you, be you an individual entrepreneur out there or a business, where do they go? Where do they find you?
If you go to theideaslab.org, so that's theideaslab.org, and join at the bottom, there's a thing to join the email list, and you can join that. And I'm also starting my own podcast called The Ideas Lab, all about turning ideas into books, brands, and businesses. And I'm also doing quite an interesting project coming up, which is completely different. We should have talked about this actually, called the Love Challenge. So I'm going to create a whole new course in a different area that's nothing to do with products and businesses and books, but about dating, love, and relationships. And the idea is that I'm going to learn in the creation of this thing, because this is an area that I do not feel an expert in, I have to say, Richard. And so as I'm learning and I'm creating this course that's going to run in November of 2018, I'm also going to share what I'm doing to build what is effectively a business from scratch. So if you're interested in watching me build a business in public and probably make a complete fool of myself and learn something about dating relationships while I'm doing it, because that's That's the subject matter of the business.
So you will be dating through this experiment.
That is one of the things, yes. So Saskia is one of our experts. So she's going to do some dating profile photos. We're going to video the photo shoot. This is going to be incredibly embarrassing. But it's for men and women of all ages. And we're going to run one of these online experiences where hopefully
there will be other men on the platform other than you, John.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, a friend of mine created a dating platform called he's called Shared, and he created a dating app called Shinder, and the only man on it was Shared, and you could just choose whether to date or not Shared, and that got him a massive amount of press. He's a guy who knows how to get PR. But no, that's not how it works in the Love Challenge. It's going to be men and women learning primarily about, if dating seems to be a bit broken. I was discussing this with someone this morning who might be working with me on it. And, is Tinder really working? And are relationships working? Why are 50% of marriages ending in divorce? We want to find out, speak to the best experts, men and women of all different kind of theoretical persuasions, get the best ideas, share them as we're going along, but also create a transformational experience in 30 days in November. And alongside it, start with 0 traffic, 0 email subscribers, and 0 revenue, and share what I'm doing that works and doesn't work. So if you want to follow all that, basically join the email list on theideaslab.org, and that's probably a good place to start.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for being human.
Very good. Thank you.